I wanted to welcome everyone most officially to our Hispanic Heritage Month Ask Me Anything event. This is a series that we put together monthly, particularly for different types of communities to connect, to learn, to share information. It's a space just for us. Special shout out to my No Sepos. That is the No Sabo Kid 2.0 because I know some Spanish, but it is quite funny. Today's discussion will center on expanding Latino leadership. My name is Ada Recinos. I use she, her, ella pronouns, and I am the Marcom's Associate Director at NDTC. In my official capacity, I am your moderator today. But this panel is meant to be really a collective conversation. As we get ready to start, please continue to introduce yourself in the chat with your name and pronouns if you'd like to share where you're joining from. And another reminder that those questions for our panelists can be put in the chat at any time. Laura will help me keep track of them, and we will have some time at the end to respond. So before we get started, I wanted to give you a quick overview of what we do here at NDTC. The National Democratic Training Committee is how Democrats like you and I win elections, build long-term power in our communities. Our tools are free, and our trainings enable every Democrat and person on the left, no matter the background, zip code, or resources needed to step up and lead change. The panelists that you'll meet today have a wide range of personal and professional experiences in the world of Democratic campaigns, and I'm very excited that we have the privilege of hearing from them and learning. I'm going to turn things over to our panelists in just a moment, but first, some housekeeping announcements. We have a couple virtual training norms at NDTC that we want to remind everyone of today. One of them is around closed captioning that I mentioned. You can go ahead and enable that and click on live transcript and then click show subtitle. We will be taking questions and answers, so feel free to put those in at any time. And then a quick reminder that you can go ahead and chat Laura with any questions or any technical assistance that you might need during the panel. So since today's experts are going to be telling us how they are expanding Latino leadership, it's time for us to hear directly from each of them. I'm going to go ahead and get us started with Eddie Taveras' introduction, and then we will go ahead and hear from Irene Godinez and then Victoria McGroary. So Eddie, take it away.
Hey folks, it's a pleasure being here. I'm Ada Recinos. I'm currently the National Deputy Coalitions Director here at the DNC. The way I describe my job is kind of like I am in my department is a way that the DNC touches grass and advises and brings voices of different constituency into the party. A little bit about my background is I'm from Brooklyn, New York, Dominican of immigrant descent of powerful Latinas, my grandmother and my mom, so shout out to them, who really illustrated me what it is to defend yourself, defend your family, and defend your community. And so that is truly what has brought me to this work, starting with like reproductive health care and doing campaigns, electoral campaigns, more specifically advocacy campaigns when it comes to like immigration reform at the state and national level. And so a pleasure to be here with you all and have a conversation.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Eddie. I'm going to hand it over to Irene Godinez.
Let's just drop in my little hearts for Eddie. Hey everyone, Irene Godinez here. I'm in Raleigh, North Carolina. I am the founder and one of the co-executive directors for an organization called Poder en Sí. We leverage cultural strategies and creative communications to connect with young Latinx voters across North Carolina. And we do really creative things. Like last year, we came up with telenovelas as a way to connect with voters, and we use those as digital ads as well, and are always refining and innovating ways that are that give our voters, that give our community members a sense of belonging, because in order to be able to activate your power, you first have to activate your agency and know that you belong. And my background is I'm the daughter of Mexican immigrants who were migrant farm workers in North Carolina. That's how we settled here. But in 2016, it's when I met Eddie. I was the Latinx vote director for the Hillary Clinton campaign in North Carolina, and have been doing candidate recruitment and training since then. In 2017, when I started doing candidate recruitment, there were 2 Latino electeds in North Carolina. Today we have 27. So the number keeps growing. This year we have the most amount of Latinos running for municipal seats than we ever have had in the history of North Carolina. It's 27, coincidentally, who are running for those seats. And we just had a victory in the city of Charlotte, which is the largest city in North Carolina, and they just elected a young queer Latino for city council. And he's a Poder member, and he won his race. They did a recount and he won by 34 votes. And we happen to have 97 of our members in that district that we were mobilizing to turn out. So every vote matters. And thank y'all for having me.
Every vote for sure matters. I'll hand it over to Victoria McGroary.
Hi, everyone. I am Victoria McGroary. I am the Executive Director of CHC Bold PAC. So we are the campaign arm of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus. It's really nice to be here with you all. I am Puerto Rican from Philly. It's a similar experience growing up, I think, to Eddie in terms of sort of being Hispanic in an urban setting. I have a very unconventional pathway into politics. I was getting my PhD in 2016 when the presidential election happened. I was sort of wrapping that up, and I was kind of very much so on track toward going into academia, trying to teach some students, many like yourself on this call. And I really felt compelled after Hillary Clinton lost that race to completely switch gears and sort of jump in. I grew up in a house that, as many of you I'm sure know, 100% focused on family. We were very religious, so church was also, incredibly important. And that was really sort of it, right? Kind of community was number one. And we were not politically engaged. My family did not vote. My mom was a very young single mom and was the exception to that rule. And so that really had a big impression on me early on. And it made me see how important voting is and how it is really sacred, and how, politics is just really a hands-on sport. And so in 2016, I decided to completely shift gears in my career, and I started knocking on doors and volunteering for campaigns. And I quickly got the campaign bug. I worked sort of from the ground up, city council, all the way to a Senate race. I was working for Elizabeth Warren's reelect at the time in 2018. And then I sort of came down to DC and did some more higher level work, like what we do at Bold PAC. And so, we are very proud of the work we've done. We obviously have had a couple of crazy elections the last few years in terms of both, the House, the Senate, obviously the White House as well. But we have had very large success here at Bold PAC. We are 2 cycles in a row, we elected the largest Congressional Hispanic Caucus in history, which we are all very proud of. And considering that we used to be bipartisan and we used to also have Republicans in the caucus, it is sort of that much more impressive that we have soon to be 43 Hispanic members of the House and Senate that are Democrats. And so it's really great to be here today. I am very excited to hear from you and to share, some of what I've seen from my vantage point here.
Amazing. Thank you, Victoria, for sharing that and for giving us some hope core there. So I'm going to jump into the questions, and then we're going to give each panelist a little bit of time to answer. So we were thinking a little bit when we were putting these questions together about how we start from a place of positivity and victory. And I think Victoria was the great segue to that. Since 2000, the number of elected officials in the US who are Latino has roughly doubled. This is very good. Despite these substantial gains, the number of Latino office holders is still far from proportional to the overall Latino population in the country. Where do each of you see the greatest opportunities to challenge the underrepresentation, especially in states where Republican leaders have made concerted efforts to suppress and intimidate those who attempt to exercise political power? I'm going to go ahead and go in the same order and hand it off to Eddie first.
Yeah, so my philosophy is not there's a specific region where I think I mean, yes, there like I think the South and like the West is that it's speaking the mind of like where a lot of Latinos are moving and growing in demographic. I'll let Irene speak more on that. But I also say is that there are seats that are currently open that go either uncontested by Democrats and particularly Latinos across the board. So I think the issues that we've been having is that we are very narrow in what we define as a powerful elected and public service position, right? Governorship, Congress, and so on and so forth. But in the last few years, one thing that the right has highlighted is that school boards are highly important in how we educate our kids and how we believe in public school system, right? As a person who grew up and learned in public school system, both K through 12, but also from a university perspective, that's critical to Latinos across the board. When we're looking at electoral boards, right? And particularly in the voter suppression and voter protection arena, where we're starting to see, and I think there was a misconception that it was just like an African American Black issue. We're starting to see the suppression of Latino voters across the board, and just by the way you look, and even by your last name of how they target you. You've seen in Georgia, I'm sure North Carolina has a lot of story, Texas, and so on and so forth. And so there are opportunities if we're willing to look and if we highlight those, and also stepping up to leadership. One thing I would say is particularly with this new generation of Generation X and also younger millennials, I happen to be, I guess, going into the elder aspect now, but they're not waiting their turn and they have a perspective and a point of view as to why they want to run, right? There's a specific character that leads to why you want to do that, and understanding that public service in elected office is not the only way. I think there's many people in this room that can attest to that. But at the same time, there's a lot of key things as to why our values as Latino can relate to other constituency groups. And I also want to beat this misconception to power to Victoria, who's been able to do that, is that Latino can run in majority white districts. Latino can represent other people than Latinos. And one thing that Bold PAC has been very clear-eyed on doing and illustrating is that that is happening, right? Latinos have won in very battleground contested races where the majority of the folks are white, right? And so we have a story to tell, we have a perspective, and we have a point of view that is just not Latino and Latinidad, but it is also across, ethnicities, nationality, and so on and so forth. And so you will find opportunity where you can. So I will point there.
Amazing. Irene, can you tell us a little bit more about your thoughts?
Oh my goodness, yes. This is one of my favorite subjects. So first, I guess I should make a confession. I was raised Southern Baptist, so I always have a guilty conscience, and so I'm always gonna like be very transparent. And I'm an unaffiliated voter, and so that's my confession. But I did recruit the first progressive Latino to run for state legislature. It was Ricky Hurtado, and he ran in 2020, and he won. And he ran in a very red district, but we had a feeling that it was actually purple and that we just needed somebody who could run with his convictions. And that election taught me a lot of different things. One is that our people, and it took me 3 to 4 years to get him to say yes. So, like, it was a long con. It took a minute. But sometimes we just need to create those mirrors and have those stories so that it can create the possibility for other people to imagine themselves in those roles. So Ricky was our first, but he's certainly not going to be our last person. And then the next order of business for me, as I was doing recruitment work, was looking at those local offices. The seats, going back to what Eddie was saying earlier, the seats that go uncontested many times are at the local level, a school board, water and soil commissioner, different seats like this. And so I always try to go and to recruit people who have ganas from different places. One of the people that I started nurturing her leadership, she worked at a coffee shop, and her boss said she has leadership qualities. She says she wants to run for office. She was 19 when I connected with her because inevitably time is going to go by, y'all. And we have to make early investments in people who hold promise and not just the sure thing. And so this young woman is now an organizer, and she is doing incredible work with an organization that provides a lot of support to undocumented immigrants in North Carolina. And we're going to have a conversation about her running for a seat in the city council for Durham in 2027. So make these investments in the people in your community and throw out whatever narrative you have of what a candidate is supposed to look like and what narrative they're supposed to have, um, and make those investments early. If you're on this call, you're a leader. You're already somebody who probably takes a lot of initiative. Begin having those conversations with people, and there's already different places where you can plug people in. If you know folks in North Carolina, I'll always be happy to sit and chat with folks. I'm talking to high schoolers right now who have expressed interest in running for office, and they're in rural North Carolina. And what I've learned is that many of the candidates, Latino candidates who have run for office in North Carolina in the last several years have come from rural areas. And the reason is, in my opinion, I haven't researched it, but if you can survive in rural places that surely don't create a sense of belonging for our people, then you're already wired to be a different type of person. And you will be someone who will be a public servant for everybody, not just Latinos. And that's the thing, is that when we get Latino candidates to run, they will come up with solutions that will benefit everybody, because whatever is helpful to Latinos, especially Afro Latinos, it's going to be of a huge difference and benefit to everybody else up that hierarchy. I'll leave it there.
Thank you so much. I'll hand it off to Victoria to close us out on this question.
Yeah, so this is, something that I think everyone, the three of us have thought a lot about, and it seems like many of you on this call have as well. I think I do want to sort of reinforce a point that Eddie made, which is, there other candidates and other sort of demographic of candidates do not necessarily think, well, I can only represent X, Y, or Z type of district, right? They see an opportunity, they sort of see themselves as a leader, and they kind of jump in, and that's how it is. I mean, look at how much work has been done over the course of many decades, great work to get more women to run, right? Women, do not sit there and think, how many women are in this district? Can I represent it or not? And there are significant barriers to women running for office, especially women of color. And so I do think that as, we are all thinking about what representation looks like, the reality is that we belong here. We belong in every level of elected office. We belong in every level of the sort of democratic process, right? That does not mean that running for local office or not any type of office, elected office, is all that you can do. I think that what, I have learned in my time, and I hope that recent elections have reminded us that we've just got to get in. We've got to get involved, right? And so, and we have to push ourselves to do more. And I think, that means, yes, getting someone who says, I want to be involved, I want to run for office. Okay, great. Let's get you organizing. Like, let's just get you in this system and starting to make an impact. Because the reality too is that, I see issues with representation of the Latino community, not just in office, which is obviously what we're talking about, but also at the staff level in these big staff positions, right? And so, this really matters. And it matters because when Latinos are represented across the spectrum, from sort of volunteers to staff to candidates, to campaign staff, right? All of this, that's when our values and our people can be better represented. We all know that the second, you know, our spidey senses start tingling when we see things that either are or are not good for our community, right? And we do what we can to either sort of advance that and highlight that or fix it. And so, you know, there is really, really a very big need for more Latinos at every level. And there is a lot of valuable impact to be had in that work. Something that I have noticed as I have gotten older, you know, when I was a kid, everyone I knew practically was Puerto Rican. And so, yes, there was a very deep culture. I live in Philly with, like, you know, the whole neighborhood is kind of speaking Spanish, like even at, you know, the Chinese place, right? They're like selling, you know, Puerto Rican food, right? It's just like, that's the community that I grew up in. I think a lot of people grew up in similar places, but that was not represented in pop culture or sort of mainstream, you know, US culture in any way, shape, or form. And I think that we are seeing that there is really a much better representation of kind of Latino culture across the board in the United States now, and it is becoming more mainstream. The fact that we're talking about Hispanic Heritage Month, I never heard of this when I was a kid. You know, that it all sort of tells you. And I think, you know, it's because our community matters. We are here. We are a big part of the community. We are a big part of what it means to be American. And we hold the same values that, you know, anyone would call the, you know, core American values around family, around, you know, kids, around education, you know, all of these things. And we can really speak to those things from a very unique perspective, but in a way that is very, very deeply, deeply American, right? Hard work, like all of these things that we sort of think about are really values that people call American. They are really also very part and parcel of what it means to be Latino in this country. And so our voices have very unique value in this process, from putting your name on the ballot, whether that means for Senate or Congress or for school board or water commissioner, you know, getting volunteering, knocking on those doors. All of these things make a huge impact.
May I say one more thing, Eva?
Yes, of course.
Just because I see some things in the chat. So one of the best ways to position yourself to be a candidate is to show up for the meetings that happen. So, for example, I think, Mary, I saw that someone is recruiting you to run for something, and there are other folks that are talking and scouting and looking for people. The first thing that I tell anyone who's interested in running for office is to read through the minutes of your city council, read through the minutes of county commission meetings, and sit and nerd out on whatever level of office it is that you think you want to do. A lot of times we think of these huge positions like congressional positions and US Senate, and that's great, but that's probably not going to be the reality and the entry point for many of our people. And so the best way that people can position themselves is by showing up to those meetings in real time. And I know that that's really challenging because for working people, because it happens during work days and work hours. But if it's something that you're interested in, show up to see what's the business that they are addressing. And also because that can also be the part of the pipeline in Charlotte. One of the ways that they were able to appoint a young Indian American woman was because she just kept showing up to the Charlotte City Council meetings over and over. And when a vacancy became available, one of the council members said, "Oh, I've noticed this person. She's from my district and she's very well informed about what's happening because she's been showing up to these meetings for the last year and a half. What about her?" And then it turns out she was a great candidate and she is now in that office. And it really is a lot about showing up so that that way people can know that you're serious about representing and serving your community. And then the other thing is to think about what are the values that you have and really like be discerning so that you can plug into organizations in your nonprofits in your community that hold those values. So for me, it's reproductive justice. So if that's one of my strongest values, and I'm going to look for the repro justice organizations, and most likely they will have a C4 entity with which I could plug into the political system with as well. And then these could be natural places that would eventually give you an endorsement or consider you for that. And so it really is about showing up, being consistent, and letting someone know that this is something that's of interest to you, because then at that point they can plug you into the different places where you can get trained. Organizations like Run for Something or Working Families Party. I'm sure the Democratic Party also has some trainings for people who are interested in running. So finding the trainings that align with your values.
Absolutely. Thank you, Irene. That's actually how I got appointed. I used to write little memos to turn people out to city council meetings around things that matter to me. So it is possible. It does happen. I was wondering if Eddie or Victoria had anything to add to some of the chat that's happening, or some of the, I guess, comments in the chat. You can let me know. Victoria, go ahead.
Yeah, I see someone, Kelly Ann, is asking about sort of being open about our backgrounds. I think the answer is affirmatively yes, to the extent that you personally are comfortable with. We all come to the table as human beings, first and foremost, and that is what voters are craving, right? Real people doing this work, real people that can speak to what they're facing, right? And like who you are influences everything that you do, your worldview, and how you approach this work and how you would approach the work as an elected representative. And so, as to the extent that you feel that something is important and you feel comfortable, you should absolutely talk about it. Right now there are obviously a lot of conversations around immigration, a lot of really, really, really hard stuff that we are all seeing that is affecting us personally, our families, our friends, emotionally, right? Like this is our community. These are people. And I think that people have lots of different opinions around this issue is very obvious and is becoming increasingly clear. And, voters will decide what they feel about your background. And, losing, unfortunately, is part of what it means to have a democracy, right? If we are not losing as Democrats sometimes, then we do not have a functioning democracy. It is actually really core here, right? Debate, disagreement is fundamentally what democracy is about, actually. And so, the chips may fall where they may, but at the end of the day, your name is on the ballot. It is your campaign. You should absolutely feel empowered and proud to talk about your experience the way you want to, because it is going to inform everything. And voters can sniff out someone who's not being genuine, pretty easily.
Yeah, I'll just quickly chime in here. Don't hire that campaign manager. Again, we have spent so much time trying to be at the table and have a seat at the table that, Kelly, for you to have put yourself out there, put your family out there, the last thing we ever want to see is you become part of the shadow, right? Like, and hide yourself because of that. I agree with like kudos to everything that Irene and Victoria said. I think authenticity is above all else that voters are wanting to see, even when they disagree with you, right? I can have examples on both the right and the left of candidates that have won and that have won in places where you would think voter would disagree, but guess what? The voter will know where they stand on those issues and will know that there's a level of transparency and honesty. And I would say like we have a lot of good Democrats that have won in places. We always think on presidential, but like in North Carolina, we won. The state had a good win in 2024, thanks to Irene and a lot of the work that folks were doing, Arizona and Nevada. And so there are a plethora of examples of people being authentic who they are, Latinos specifically, and Latinas being authentic to who they are, who have won despite of, right? And there's data points to prove it. So don't let anyone at any point tell you to shy away from who you are, because as Victoria said, you're the person, it's your name on the ballot, and they're voting for who you are, not what they think you should be.
100%. What an excellent segue. We're going to chat a little bit about Latino voters. They now account for 50% of the total growth of eligible voter population since 2020. That's nearly 15% of all eligible voters are Latinos. With such a diverse range of experiences as we've been chatting about for the last couple minutes, these political leanings represent in Latino communities, what are our unifying values that can serve as a foundation for progressive political solidarity? And I will actually open it up to whoever wants to go first. Eddie, Victoria? Victoria,
I'm happy to
away.
jump in here. So, I think what's really important and something that we talk a lot about, because this is a question that we get all the time. And it's a little funny of a question because what do Latino voters care about? Same things everybody cares about, right? And so, there's no mystery here in terms of issues and substance, they want to have economic security and prosperity. They want to have a good job that they can afford a house and maybe a family vacation every year. They want their kids to go to a good school where they are safe, right? I mean, we can go down the line, but this is fundamentally Latino voters care about the exact same things that everybody else cares about. Ultimately, we are here just trying to live a good life, in a way that is safe and secure for ourselves and our families and our community. And so, it's funny because we really get this question quite a lot, and that I always lead with that. It's the same thing. Any issue that anybody sort of cares about it's the same thing. I think the difference here that is where the real work that we all do is, it's not what we're communicating about, it's how we're communicating that message, right? Making sure that we are doing it in ways that are meeting Latinos where they are, right? That means absolutely at their doors, in their communities, at community events, at church. It means online, right? Latino voters are absolutely on their phones all the time. They are we are tech savvy, right? We're on YouTube, we're on WhatsApp, we're right meeting Latino voters where they are and in ways that make sense culturally, right? In authentic ways. And so, that does mean speaking Spanish, right? And Spanish that's a whole other sort of bucket of how are we speaking Spanish and where. Because ultimately most Latinos in this country are actually English dominant, but Spanish is very, very important to us, even if some of us have no understanding of the language sort of in a sort of understanding way, right? We know very basic phrases like familia, comunidad, trabajo, all of this stuff, and it really matters. And so Spanglish really matters too, particularly to younger Latinos. I speak Spanglish in my home every single day of the week. My kids speak Spanglish. And so that really matters. And so, making sure that we're meeting communities where they are in Spanish, in Spanglish, in English, in the platforms that they are, in the ways sort of that they are communicating in culturally competent, very authentic ways. But what we're saying is the same thing that any other community is talking about.
Yeah, I'll chime in here because I agree. When I get this question, I'm a little perplexed because I'm like, aren't we humans too? Like we live in the same country. I where I try to interpret is like they're trying to figure out what is the cultural saliency and like kind of vessels that kind of unites us all. I would say to some extent it is Spanish, right? Whether you speak it or not, there's some cultural relevancy there. But as you break down, as Victoria was saying, there's different dialects. And I would say I'm Dominican. My dialect is just very different than my wife who's Guatemalteca, right? Like, and we have the same words that have different meanings. And this is the way I see a lot of that question is also trying to box us into something where we're kind of a little bit everywhere and just a little more complex in the aspect of it. I think in the core essence, we believe in the American dream, whether the border jumped you or you came right through it. And so it's understanding that dynamic that we have the same American values of prosperity, family, and community. I also, just on the cultural aspect that a lot of people get wrong, of Latinos, and particularly this new demographic of Puerto Ricans and Dominicans, and a lot of Central American coming in, is like this humoristic aspect of how you message to us too, that we can talk about very serious things that is painful and hurtful in ways that I think are relevant of how we received information and how we kind of like look into hard work, put your head down, and kind of like walk through it. And so I see that question more of from a cultural perspective of how do we show up electorally and what unifies us. But it's very different because Latin America is represented by a plethora of countries, and different generations, that I want to say, that I think we also misunderstand when we're talking about first generation Mexican versus a fifth generation Mexican who no longer speaks English, or if English is not a prominent or dominant language. And so our jobs, and we've all been in this room when they're trying to figure us out of how we vote, is understanding those dynamics are very different. The last thing I would say is Latinos are independent voters. They should be treated as independent voters. What that means is that you need to target them, you need to persuade them, you need to talk to them. They need to feel you and see you. And I think the last two, feel you and see you, is critical when we're looking at Pennsylvania with Puerto Ricans and Dominicans, who the way they do politics is just vastly different than Mexican Americans. And so those culture drivers are just sometimes challenging for people to understand, even Latinos themselves who have been just focused in the past way of how you do political outreach or engagement with these communities, just because demographic has changed over the last 10 or plus years.
Yeah, I agree with what Eddie and Victoria have said about we want the same things, but I think when I look at this, I pull back and see that oftentimes the party or C4s or different consultants and vendors want to know the who and the what, like who should our messengers be and what are they saying? But we need to pull back and actually ask why and ask how. Going back to what Victoria said about the how matters, because when our communities are receiving messaging, it is right around the corner from an election, and so the why is they want to turn our people out to vote, but it immediately reeks of transactional, and our voters can smell it, and our voters reject it, and it's like dating. Right now, you're getting these messages that are like, marry me, marry me. And our voters are like, don't you want to ask me out first? Don't you want to date me first? Get to know me? Like, take me out to dinner? And it's very similar for voters. At the end of the day, we're wanting to be in relationship with voters. And so you have to actually start the early investments way before the election is around the corner, so that way you're not moving clumsily and just like translating whatever is already in English into Spanish and think that it's gonna make the impact that you want it to have. But then the how also matters. Like, we have to lead with honesty and with truth, and we don't tend to see very much of that coming from the candidate side or the party side. And this is where I always kind of jump on this soapbox and say the C4 organizations have an opportunity to be very transparent, to, the party systems are unwieldy and they are kind of like the way that they are. So the place where there's flexibility and where there can be more innovation and where there can be like some risk taking is on the independent side of politics with C4 organizations. And one of the things that we did in 2020 as we were starting as an organization was that we sent a mailer to all of the Latino voters who voted in the primaries. and it had the image of Walter Mercado on it, and it said, "Thank you for voting." So we didn't show up with them with the election around the corner to be like, "And will you vote?" We sent them something beautiful that doubled as an art print that they could hold on to, that they wanted to frame on and put on their fridge. Um, and it was a thank you. And then it was an invitation, join our organization to build independent political power. And so then, we gained a lot of members from that because they saw it and they were like, a quién se le ocurre? Like, who would send us a Walter Mercado something? And so from there, then we moved on to sending a slew of beautiful mail that doubled as art prints. And we create, again, the how matters so much because we create the programs in order to shape the type of culture that we want to have on the political side. We want to have a culture where voting feels like a rite of passage, where it feels like the excitement that you have for a quinceañera or the excitement that you have to go to a wedding, that's the same level of excitement that you have to go voting. And I know that right now it feels very far-fetched because it's like we're all watching this like horrible movie unfolding before our eyes, but it's because we're talking to voters as if they're merely observers of democracy instead of being the protagonists and the stars of democracy. And we need to flip that by creating ways of engaging them in a way that is worthy of their time. Because at the end of the day, that's the most valuable thing that anyone can give us. All of y'all, I'm sure, have given of your time to the party or to a candidate or something. And it's because you lead with these convictions and these values. But by the same token, a layperson who's a voter, they want to feel like they matter and they want to feel that you're not going to waste their time. And the best way that you can honor their time is by being truthful with them, by being transparent, by innovating programs that are worthy of their time.
Absolutely. Thank you, Irene. We have a running joke in my family when people come and knock on our doors in November, the week of the election, we call them "Ahí vienen las láminas." Because in Central America, when someone wants to vote, they will bring the giant metal roof things and be like, "Here you go, vote for me." And so let's move past that transactionality and be more intentional about when we come in. I want to encourage folks to put some questions in the chat. We have one little short question. We're going to do a little round robin, and then we can get into a little bit more conversation. But this is for anyone who wants to jump right in. What's the best political advice that you've ever received?
I'm happy to jump in here. I was on a campaign in 2018, and we had a little office, and obviously we were pinching our pennies and trying to save, every dollar that we could. And so we ended up the candidate actually said, "All right, everyone is going to clean every Friday. We are not paying for a cleaner. Like, this office gets really gross. We're just going to spend 20 minutes and we're going to rotate jobs and blah, blah, blah." And so, even the candidate, manager, everybody, sometimes it was their turn to clean the toilets, right? Which was not my favorite job, I'll tell you that much. And it really instilled this like real sort of everyone's here, we are just here to work. And I think something that I have really taken from that experience and have tried to sort of instill in others is, you're never too big or too small to clean the toilet or to take out the trash. Sometimes that's actually exactly what is needed to be done. And so I just encourage you all, as you are moving forward in your career and wherever this takes you, don't forget that. And I think also leading by example with that is something that people crave, right? That authenticity, that sort of, I'm just rolling up my sleeves and getting it done. And I'm really, working hard here. It's really motivational and effective. It gets stuff done.
Cool. Maybe Eddie, you can answer this one next.
Yeah. I think in the world of politics, a lot of the times we always seek someone to help us and like a mentor. And I think the best advice I've received is seek a role model, not a mentor. There's a lot of bad habits that we've pick up and then we learn and then that we exacerbate and scale and move to other folks. And understanding your uniqueness of where you are, what your limitation is, and then also where do you seek joy in the process of that too is like a lot of things are happening at the same time currently, and like a lot of things are happening directly to our families, communities, and so on and so forth. And so it's like understanding who you are and not changing that to reflect a mold, to be able to run for office, to be able to ask for that promotion, to be able to have a seat at the table and see that other people look like you and share the same experience, or at least under or can empathize and be compassionate towards you. And so that's something I always try to live by is like, who do I want to be my role models, and what is it about what they're manifesting that I want versus a personality that a lot of the times is not a match for me or what I'm seeking to do for my community.
Yeah, that kind of goes hand in hand with what I think I'm going to say. Be more of what you want to see in the world. Like if you want to see more people stepping up and rolling their sleeves up and, going and cleaning the toilets, if that's what needs to be done, then you have to model that as well. You have to be doing that as well. And if you want more honesty and transparency, then lead in that way. So everything that you want to see more of in the world, be that too. And also, as corny as it sounds, like do the things with love and with cariño, because it really, really does make a difference. And you really can sense and feel that even through a Zoom, if you're connecting with other people, energy begets energy. And so when you move from a place of love, that's one of the entry points to people feeling a sense of belonging. And so much of what we're battling right now is that a lot of people don't feel that they belong somewhere. They don't belong in a particular party, or they don't belong in the communities. And there's narratives outside of us that are reinforcing that too. Um, and so the more that we can embody and become love, as again, as corny as it sounds, but it really does make a difference. And it is the difference and the reason why people will continue to show up. If you have a volunteer who brings, tamales to a campaign event, and you go up to them and you say, "These tamales are so special. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this." I guarantee that that person will show up again with another basket of tamales the next time, because they're going to remember how you made them feel by recognizing their contribution. And people want to feel that their contributions, big or small, that they are recognized and seen.
Amazing. Thank you so much for those pieces of advice. We've got a couple of questions, but not that much time. So I'm going to throw one out there, and if someone could step up to answer it. Axel, I've kind of shortened your question so that we can get one answer for it. Are the biggest threats to Latino communities unique to the community itself, or do they intersect with broader systemic issues like gerrymandering and campaign finance reform? This is a big who has an opinion, a hot take. Do it.
I have a hot take on this, and I think that the common denominator for so many of our woes is white supremacy. And we will put buckets, maybe it's gerrymandering, or maybe it's voter suppression, or maybe it's no. The original sin of this country is chattel slavery, and the fact that we have not acknowledged it from the highest levels and said, yes, this is part of our history, and we need to recognize that this is real and that the impacts of that continue to exist today. If you look at any sector of our society, it is reflected in that. And we won't get to build the democracy that we deserve until we address the insidious nature of white supremacy in all of our systems and in all facets of this American experiment. So yes, the common denominator is white supremacy, and the way that they're able to siphon off parts of our community is because we still get benefits as Latinos with our proximity to whiteness because we are such a multifaceted community that it's easy for us to blend in with more white dominant power structures. Or so we have to get to a point where we grapple with this honestly and where we are able to then say, okay, if this is the reality of where we've been, then how can we create other systems to make sure that we're lifting up the voices that we don't hear much of? Because at the end of the day, Paulo Freire, a Brazilian philosopher and educator, said that only the strength that springs from the well of the oppressed is sufficiently strong to liberate not just the oppressed, but also our oppressors. What that means is that Black and Brown people, in my opinion, are the closest to many solutions for our society, because we know intimately what it's like to be oppressed, and to be on the marginalized side of things. And we've had to come up with ways of surviving that could benefit everyone. But we need to open those avenues to talk about this and to really own it and to own our anti-Blackness in the Latino community too, and to be radically honest. And the truth is what will set us free, but we have to grapple with that.
Thank you so much for that, Irene. That is the church that I go to, dismantling white supremacy. I wanted to give both Victoria and Eddie maybe like a minute or two to just close us out with any final thoughts. And then we have mainly some housekeeping. But I really appreciate the conversation that we've had. There is a survey for y'all in the chat. Please fill that out and give us some feedback. The conversation was really great. So if you want to go ahead and click the three dots on the corner of the chat and save it for yourself, you can then follow up with us. I will be personally, I send out these emails to chat with y'all and see how we can be of further assistance. So I will be following up with some resources. I saw that there was something around keeping like starting a community going. You know, I would love if maybe Oscar, we can chat and you could lead that for us, right? Like, why wouldn't we do that together? So I'll go ahead and let Victoria, Eddie, and then Irene also, if you want to close us out with anything, we've got 4 minutes. I'll hand it over to Victoria first.
Thank you all so much for joining us. I think, you know, it's absolutely true that obviously you just being here today in and of itself indicates that you are leaders and that you have, you know, a voice and a great contribution. So love the hat, love the love the energy we're getting from Oscar. You know, just keep up the good work. I don't think I need to tell anybody here that sometimes things can feel pretty bleak and overwhelming. And, you know, it is okay to feel that. But, you know, look to your community, look to people who can, who share those values that you can lean on, and don't walk away from the work because of that. As much as you may feel that, really what that tells you is that more is needed. And so, you know, jump in. You may not know what you're doing. Certainly that was the case when I jumped in sort of first, but you know, you have a valuable contribution, you have a valuable experience, and you will learn very quickly.
Yeah, so for me, I'm like, go feel joy. I think a lot of the times, and I know I said this earlier, but a lot of the times we baggle down and like everything is so serious and so heavy, and we have to heal too. We have a short life in this wonderful and beautiful earth, and so figuring that out of what it is that brings you that energy and that joy and passing it forward. And then obviously we're in Hispanic Heritage Month, but we know that it doesn't start or begin in this middle of 2 months. And a practice I always do is bringing somebody with you. And I think that is one of the most pleasure and honors I've had in being in my position and helping people, whether it's landing job, whether it's providing advice, whether it's, you know, prepping them for whatever it is, and vice versa. And so continue that on. The work doesn't stop with you, and it doesn't stop also or start in an elected office or being in a high position. You can do that right now. But given you're all leaders in your communities, making sure that we're spreading that on and, you know, helping another Latino, Latina forward. So.
And I'll say, take risks, be courageous, risk failing, because those are the things that will put us on the path towards having some real wins. And, you know, last year when we created the telenovelas, people were like, what are y'all doing? And we just knew that we had to try something different. And if it's okay with y'all, it's only 30 seconds. I'm actually going to share the novela so that y'all can see what impactful 30 seconds can look like, and that these are choices that parties and all of us can make. So I'm just
in these United States, women's bodies are used as political playground. There are laws that will strip a woman of her full human rights before guaranteeing her safety. Our bodies are the last things that belong to us. So what could be more important than having full agency over them, than having a right to privacy?
Yeah, do you mind? This is personal.
Than having the power to choose.
telenovelas. Who knew? It was a risk, but it was worth it. And it's a longer story, but just leaving you with that teaser.
Thanks so much, everyone, for joining us. I really appreciate everyone taking the time. Let's give it up for our wonderful panelists. What a privilege. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.